He's the best midfielder in the world at the moment.
The football season is in full swing on BBC Sounds.
They've still got their best football to play, which is huge.
With everything to play for in the Premier League and Champions League.
It's an enormous win that will give them hope.
Hear the latest news, insight and analysis with Football Daily.
We want to see emotions, we want to see players that care.
If they can get momentum going in the league, they can take that into both competitions.
And listen to games as they happen on BBC Radio 5 Live.
What an incredible game.
Listen on BBC Sounds.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Sutherland and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast. Kickstarting your week with all the news, views and analysis you need. As we record, it is the evening of Sunday, the 3rd of March. And well, where to start after that weekend?
Newhoff slips, come back to Shadland, goal! Lawrence Shadland, no doubt about this one!
We'll look back on Hearts' 2-0 victory over Celtic at Tynecastle and discuss why Brendan Rodgers is raging with VAR. Oh, there was also one of the shocks of the season at Ibrox.
Spittle swings the cross ball in, the header! It's in! Motherwell are back in front!
But have Rangers got away with one? And
there's the headed chance, and it's in! Jose Olasanya has won it for St Mirren in the most dramatic of circumstances.
Where does St Mirren's sensational late show leave Neil Warnock and Aberdeen?
This is the Scottish Football Podcast.
Today we are joined by Scott Allan, the former Celtic and Hibs midfielder, currently playing for Larne on loan from Arbroath, and Ryan McGowan, St Johnstone's Australian international defender. Great to have you both with us. I can start with you, Scott. What's been your highlight of the Scottish football weekend?
I think the highlight was post-analysis from Brendan Rodgers, calling out John Beaton, to be honest, by name. I thought, it's not often you kind of see Brendan kind of get back up as much as he did today. I think he was really aggravated by the decisions, obviously, that some will say went against for Hearts and for Celtic. I thought that was kind of telling where he's probably at the moment.
Huge talking point, absolutely. We'll get to that in a second. As for you, Ryan, you're obviously at Tynecastle today, but you were playing yesterday and there was so much to talk about. What stuck out for you?
Yeah, obviously it's been a big talking point this weekend with Rangers losing at Ibrox and then obviously Celtic losing today, but I also thought St Mirren's win over Aberdeen, in terms of St Mirren as a club, the importance of that win and them sort of establishing themselves in the top six, and then also the repercussions of Aberdeen and that loss. You know, obviously us at St Johnstone getting that draw, we jumped above them, albeit with them with the game in hand, but you know, I think that was a pretty big moment for sort of St Mirren's season as such, and also possibly Aberdeen's.
All in front of the head of FIFA, Gianni Infantino. I hope he enjoyed his day out in Paisley. Plenty more from Scott Allan and Ryan McGowan very soon. Before we get through any more, let's quickly run through the latest Scottish football headlines. Brendan Rodgers has branded the refereeing in Hearts' 2-0 victory over Celtic as absolutely shocking. Celtic had Yang sent off and conceded a penalty after a VAR intervention as they missed the chance to go back to the top of the table. Sunday's drama came after an incredible day of action on Saturday when Motherwell produced the shock of the day to defeat league leaders Rangers 2-1 at Ibrox. Hibs had a fairly routine 2-0 victory over Ross County at Easter Road. But the afternoon's other three results were all decided by late goals. 10-man Kilmarnock snatched a 91st minute equaliser to draw 2-2 at Dundee. Ryan, St Johnstone scored in the 87th minute to earn a draw at home to Livingston, but it was St Mirren who produced the most memorable stoppage time scenes, with goals in the 96th and 97th minutes to come from behind to overcome Aberdeen 2-1. Neil Warnock still without a league win in charge at the Tawdry. And it's as you were at the top of the SWPL table after leaders Rangers hammered Hibs 3-0 and chasers Celtic pummeled Partick Thistle 6-1. Where on earth to start? Well, let us begin at Tynecastle, shall we? The final match of the Premiership weekend. 2-0 to Hearts, but it's not really even half of the story. Starting with Ryan, perhaps, what did you make of the match overall?
Obviously, massive decisions early on. I thought the Celtic penalty at the start of the game was probably soft. Obviously, with them then missing that, it then changed the game 3 minutes later with Yang getting sent off for, again, probably a bit of a soft red card. But I probably thought after that, Hearts did really well in terms of, managing the game. It's very difficult sometimes playing against 10 men, and I thought they did pretty well in terms of handling that and keeping the ball well. I think Celtic fans will be disappointed in terms of how they played. I didn't think they carried a massive threat going forward, and I think probably at the end of the game you think that Celtic didn't really have that many chances in terms of coming back into the game, which in years gone by you probably expected them to have a spell of 10, 15, 20 minutes pressure of putting Hearts really under pressure, and I didn't think that happened today. And I thought overall it was a pretty good performance from Hearts, considering that they were playing against 10 men and they ended up going on to win that game 2-0. And again, at the end of the day, after they went down to 10 men, it was probably a pretty comfortable afternoon for Hearts.
Yeah, impressive result again for Hearts, their second 2-0 victory in a row against Celtic, of course. But Scott, we mentioned it at the top of the podcast, and we're going to talk about it right now. The VAR decisions, and Brendan Rodgers talking about how the match was refereed outside the field of play today. As you mentioned, you referenced John Beaton. Obviously, the final say does come down to the on-field referee, Don Robertson. And if we can talk about, it was 2 penalties, a red card, Shankland's disallowed goal. But if we focus on the red card, because that seems to be the one that seems to be kind of dominating the debate as far as I can see, what was your take on it? Because it is a high foot, and if you go by the laws of the game, serious foul play, it talks about how a tackle or challenge that endangers the safety of an opponent. And when you've got a boot that high with studs and somebody's head's involved, it comes down to, I guess, a matter of opinion from the referees as to whether that is serious foul play, and they obviously decided in the end that it was. But Brendan Rodgers obviously disagrees.
The key thing there is the laws of the game. I think if you ask me and Ryan, as players, if that was falling against you or even in the opposition team, you would think that was severely harsh because he's trying to play the ball over his head. But if that's the laws of the game for the serious foul play, then the two refs have came together to make that decision, then it's a hard one. But I think when you played the game every day of the week, you think that's a yellow. If that's just something that can happen in training every day of the week, and the guy gets back up and nobody blinks. But because obviously it was a big game for Celtic today, so it's had a massive impact on the outcome of the game. So it was a big call, but laws of the game, and if that's how they've interpreted the rules, they are these at the end of the day. But back to my original point, me and Ryan would probably never see that as a red card.
That's really interesting because, Ryan, you were at Tynecastle today, so was I, and I think most people inside the ground probably felt at the time that, yellow card, the match is moving on, and probably kind of felt almost like the atmosphere had accepted that, and then obviously it gets reviewed by VAR and it gets upgraded to a red card. And so I don't know exactly how you would dissect it, but I guess there is this sort of disparity sometimes between the way players see the game and the way referees see the game, and players are obviously wanting to win the match at all costs, whereas referees, I guess, are having to think about safety of players as one of their priorities.
It's a really, really tricky one, I think, because as players, like Scotty said, if anyone's playing that game, as soon as you see that clip, you know that there's no way that he is trying to kick the player in the face. For example, the still image and what VAR is showing is that the boot is high and it's causing danger towards the face of, I think it was Cochrane at the time.
Yeah.
Which is to the law correct. But if you actually look at it, taking that away, he's not trying to do that. He's trying to flick the ball over Cochrane's head, and Cochrane's put his head, albeit he's not, Cochrane's not lowered it. I think originally the ref got it spot on. And I think that's where a lot of Scottish fans are getting annoyed with the VAR, is because they feel like the ref is coming out, or the VAR is coming out with clear and obvious decisions. And then there's a lot of decisions that are possibly clear and obvious that aren't getting picked up. And then you only have to look at, sort of 20 minutes later in terms of Hearts getting that penalty. That handball is not clear and obvious. So that's where a lot of the issues are coming with, in terms of the VAR, with it's still up to debate. 5 years ago when there was no VAR, these decisions were sort of discussed in the pubs, whereas now it's terms of VAR's made these decisions and they're still getting discussed in terms of it's maybe not right, it's maybe correct. So that's where I think a lot of Scottish fans are getting annoyed at, is because we brought in VAR to clear up these clear and obvious decisions, yet we're still having these conversations after the game. Is that a clear and obvious error that the referees made at the time?
I think we're at as well, Jonathan, is that week to week the rules are changing in different games, as if the referees aren't in the same hymn sheet here. I think that's beginning now to be the overriding feeling throughout.
In what regard specifically, Scott? Are you talking about handballs?
Handballs, dangerous play, and danger an opponent. It's never consistent.
So what would you guys do? Sorry just to jump in there, but I mean, would you strip back VAR? Would you take it away from these kind of, decisions where there's an element of opinion and maybe just use it for offsides? Or what would you do?
I personally would use it goal line.
Which we can't actually use at the moment because it's a kind of different kind of technology, I suppose. But that's the only technology you would want, Ryan.
Yeah, goal line, possibly offside, but then you get sort of situations. I think there was one at Fir Park where the cameras maybe weren't aligned. I think the purity of football, which is people have loved for hundreds of years, has been that there's not been that much technology. And I think the whole thing around VAR was a lot of fans believe that would then take out the sort of, again, what we're saying, the pub's conversations of, was he offside, was it a red, was it a yellow? But I think now that it's been in sort of play for a couple of years, people are starting to realise that we still have those conversations of, was it a yellow, was it a red, was it a penalty, was it not? There's still that human element to it, and I think fans are getting a little bit disheartened. It's ruining the match day experience for a lot of fans in terms of they don't know what's happening. It's taking too long to make those decisions. I don't know if there's a way of being like, VAR has 30 seconds to make a decision. If you can't make a decision within 30 seconds, then it's not clear and obvious as to an error or a miserror that the referees made. And it just seems to be that there's a lot of decisions being made that once they've been made is a lot of backlash as to whether it was the right or wrong decision, which isn't good for the game overall.
I think on top of that as well, it's increased the pressure on the referees tenfold since VAR came in, especially in Scotland. It was meant to help the Scottish referee. I think it's made it worse. And I think if you were to ask them, they would probably say that. Do you think that if you got most of the referees on here, they would say that they've benefited from this technology? I think they would feel they're under more scrutiny.
Here's a chance for Jack Bailey's in, he pulls it back to Bear, he scores and up the post. Motherwell lead in 8 minutes at Ibrox, and Theo Bear's red hot run continues here. Motherwell, who haven't won a league game here since 1997, have an incredible lead in Govan.
Let's talk about the rest of the weekend. Obviously, it was a big victory for Hearts there. Celtic failing in their chance to take the initiative once again in the title race. And Scott, in terms of Saturday, huge result from Motherwell. Incredible victory at Ibrox. Where did it go wrong for Rangers as far as you could see?
Well, I think Rangers did pass the ball well at times, created chances. I think this debate that should Rangers have spent money for a certain someone in January, would he have converted the chances? I believe. So
you're referring to Mr. Shankland, yeah. I take it.
I think he'd have been the difference in a lot of these games that are going to be coming up for Rangers, because I think, go back to today, I know we're filming for the Rangers game, he gets 2 chances, first time finishes, end up put away properly, there's no mistake with him. He's not needing 4, 5, 6 chances, he gets a sniff and it's in the back of the net. I think that could be a potential problem coming up with the night games as well. I think you've seen that yesterday.
Ryan, I mean, what a memorable, historic victory for Motherwell. Stuart Kettlewell had a game plan, he went for it, and boy, those players executed it, didn't they?
Motherwell as a club, I think, have to take a huge amount of credit. There's a lot of sort of football worldwide in terms of, getting rid of managers and not believing in their managers. And I think Motherwell need to take big credit for that, because, Kettlewell was under a little bit of pressure, not only in the start of the season, but sort of in and around Christmas. And, they've stuck with him. And I think the players respect that. The players obviously enjoy working under him, and I think the results recently have shown that in terms of, they're definitely working for their manager. And yeah, like you said, a lot of the backlash will be because of Rangers dropping points. But I think anybody that was at the game probably would come away from it being like Motherwell were deservedly winners in terms of that game. They had a couple of more opportunities that if they took better care in terms of passing or better decision making, they could have won that game a little bit more. And I think a massive sort of credit has to go to not only Kettlewell and the players, but as the club in terms of not succumbing to that sort of pressure of getting rid of the manager, and that will solve all problems. They've sort of backed Kettlewell when he was not probably the favourite at Fir Park, and I think that's showing fruition, and they have a great chance of sneaking into that top six, and which would be an unbelievable achievement for Motherwell this season.
Absolutely. Motherwell and Hearts contributing to this hugely compelling title race. First time Rangers and Celtic have lost on the same weekend since February 2018. That was 6 years ago. In terms of significant other results of the weekend, I mean, what a day at Paisley. Those stoppage time goals that just turned it around, Scott Allan, much to the chagrin of Neil Warnock, as St Mirren beat Aberdeen 2-1 after what was a sensational Connor Barron strike, you'd have to say. Absolute worldy. In terms of that late drama, Scott, have you ever been involved in anything like that?
When I played for Portsmouth, we played Southampton, which is a big derby down there in the Championship. We were down with maybe the last kick of the ball, the old-fashioned launch-up field flick on, and we got an equaliser, and we were struggling a wee bit at the time. It was for an equaliser right enough, but it was probably one of the most memorable ones for me. As for Olusanya, who actually came on loan to Arbroath last year, and he didn't exactly hit the ground running. I used to travel with him, lovely boy, and he's really worked away at it, you know what I mean? So I'm really happy for him because he's come in this season. I think maybe gave him a wee bit of realisation when he came to Arbroath and he wasn't playing week in, week out, that he had to go back to St Mirren and work. And I think Stephen Robertson, as you can see, he's definitely got a tune out of him, and he's come up with 2 huge goals in basically a week.
Sensational impact that he had yesterday. As for Aberdeen and Neil Warnock, I mean, he's got to be feeling the heat, Ryan. And I mean, so many fans over the weekend joking about Aberdeen potentially being a championship side next season, and it's clearly not. They're not in the sort of playoff or relegation place at the moment, but they're not far away either. What on earth do you make of what's going on at Aberdeen right now?
I think they have to be very careful of falling into that trap of not picking up points. And St Johnstone, we've picked up a couple of points. Ross County have picked up a couple of points recently.
Their heads look a bit down at the moment. I mean, obviously they've not had good results, so I guess that's natural. But how do you sense the morale in that squad?
Yeah, I'm not sure if they've worked out if they're in a relegation battle, or if they just think they're going through a little bit of a tough time. I've been involved with teams that think that they're just going through a tough time, but hindsight, it looks like they're on a slippery slope, and that's probably my biggest worry if I was an Aberdeen fan was, you've seen it in previous years of teams or big teams. You look at Hibs only a few years ago now, of being relegated from being in a position roughly where Aberdeen were now, and thinking in their heads they maybe only needed 1 or 2 more wins to be safe, and the less games that go by or the more times they lose, especially results like that, it's the 95th minute, you're winning 1-0 and you come away from that game losing 2-1. It's a massive psychological blow, and I think if I was an Aberdeen fan, I'd be very, very worried of how the team's going. But at the same time, with the situation with the points are, they probably know that maybe 2 or 3 wins would get them away from that playoff space and away from sort of that uncertainty of a playoff.
As for your old side, Hibs, which Ryan briefly mentioned there, Scott, at home to Ross County, fairly routine win, but it's now 5 games without defeat. They're starting to find a bit of form under Nick Montgomery. Do you see them as squeezing into the top 6 this season?
I think Marconde's been, he looks like he's got a little bit of stardust. I watched the derby during the week, and you could see he's got a little something extra. Maybe Hibs were missing, and you're starting to see that now. They've got pace kind of all over the pitch. I think Abita's come in been excellent for Hibs this season, to be honest. And I was in this situation with Sean Maloney a couple of years ago, who, similar to what Ryan says about Aberdeen drifting out, we were needing 1 win for about 5 weeks just to get in the top 6. And I think it seems like Nick Montgomery's putting a run together just at probably the most crucial time, and Hibs are gaining confidence from it.
Yeah, it seems to have tweaked the formation, and as you mentioned, some quality additions to the squad. A bit more VAR controversy. I don't know if I can take any more. This time at Dens Park, Derek McKinnon saying he was scunnered with it after his Kilmarnock side were reduced to 10 men. I suppose we're never going to get away from managers being scunnered with refereeing decisions, but anyway, now VAR adds an extra layer. Another 2-2 draw between Kilmarnock and Dundee. What's that all about? I think that's 3 in the 3 encounters this season in the Premiership, Ryan. Utterly bizarre.
Yeah, I think overall I think Derek's probably the better of the two. Obviously going down to 10 men, being 2-1 down, it is a difficult place to go in terms of Dens Park, but I thought that they came back really well, and that would be a massively important result for them come the end of the season, I feel.
And talking of massively important results, we cannot ignore, Ryan, St Johnstone won, Livingston won. You thought we were never going to get to this match, didn't you, Ryan? But we have done.
I thought that was the most important game of the weekend, to be honest with you. But
do you know? Okay. How important was that 87th minute Nicky Clark goal? He took it well, didn't he? And Livingston, they just have no luck, no joy in life right now. And you took it away from them again.
No, I do slightly. Well, I don't feel bad, but yeah, I think anybody that was at that game knows that it was a horrible game. It wasn't a classic, but yeah, it was not a classic game at all. But from our point of view, I think we could have played better. But obviously for us, we're delighted to get the point. Marry that in with the win at Aberdeen on Wednesday, and it's probably not a bad sort of 4 points from 6 that we could have got, but at the same time, being at home and against Livingston, we were looking for those 3 points, but the way that the game kind of panned out and the way it played out, we'll take the point and kind of move on to next week.
So in terms of spectacle, Ryan, you didn't quite go full Derek Adams, but I do admire your honesty.
No, it was, anybody that was at that game would say that was one of the worst football games ever, and I would like to apologise to any fan that paid money to come to that game, because it was not a game of great quality. I think I seen a thing on Twitter today. I think the ball was only in play for 35 minutes, I think, which even then I would have still thought that was too much. There was a lot of, I think there was about 6 or 7 head knocks. Liam Gordon went off. He's got a big fat eye. That kind of sums up the game. It was a lot of collisions, injuries, and it was just not an enjoyable game at all.
I'm back. After this, I'm going to watch the highlights of that, Scott. I can't wait.
No thanks.
Scotty, you would have hated that game. That was just, you'd have walked off. After 5 minutes, you would have just walked off. That's the kind of game that it was.
For everything you need to know about your team this season, download the BBC Sport app. All the latest news, goal updates, stats and scores, and insight and analysis. Just select your club to get the biggest stories and best content at your fingertips. What a result. Download the BBC Sport app for everything you need to know about your team this season.
Before we finish up, Scott, you are currently playing with Larne in Northern Ireland on loan from Arbroath. How are you enjoying life at Larne? Is it a VAR-free zone for starters?
It's a VAR-free zone. Added in with the fans are really passionate. The ones that do go to the games, really passionate. In terms of us as a club, really forward-thinking club, backed really well and champions last year, sitting at the top of the league this year, so they're pushing for European spots again. So they ran Helsinki really close this year, put out in extra time, so there's some really good talent in that squad, and I've enjoyed it, to be fair.
You've spoken about living with diabetes and a heart condition recently, and you and I have spoken about it before. How would you sum up how that's affected your career in recent years?
I think since the heart thing, and I've not really felt it physically from it, but I just think maybe the mood round me is a bit different, because it's maybe some cause was like always diabetes and a heart thing. So I think, and maybe subconsciously in my head, having to do things, it has been difficult based on the fact I'm getting older now. So it's been
32.
Just 32. But to be fair, we train Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then the games are on Friday nights. So it's like a 4-day lead-in. Gowser on Astro, which isn't the greatest.
Not great, that is it.
But listen, it's to look back in my career and games I've enjoyed and all that, having obviously two things obviously not going in your favour, to see it as I'm happy about how my career's been. I can kind of sometimes, as I said, when I get diagnosed with a heart condition, I'm happy to look back and say I played some of these big games for Hibs, and obviously being at Celtic, won a title in my first season. All these kind of memories are coming through. So Craig Levein, can I give him my debut early doors at Dundee United, and everybody thinks Craig Levein doesn't like technical football players. I would always argue that. So I've got a lot to thank him.
Well, as we mentioned, you are 32 now. You're with Larne, on loan from Arbroath. How do you see your football future at the moment? And do you see it in terms of still playing for a couple of seasons, or do you see beyond that?
I don't know. I think I'll have a sit down in the summer and have a real think of what I want to do. If obviously something comes up that I'd be interested in, then I would obviously look at that. But I think past that, I've got a real passion. I'll go and watch my son play every weekend. I've got a real passion for developing kids. That's what I would want to do. I think in Scotland now, I think I don't want us to be the nation where everybody thinks we're all blood and guts. I see kids at 8, 9, 10 with real technical ability. Somewhere along the line get lost in a way. I don't know what that is yet, but it's something I'd like to try and help, and hopefully there's a few opportunities come my way when I go through obviously all my stages of the badges.
And Ryan, same sort of question to you. When old Father Time stops you from gallivanting across that McDermott Park pitch, what do you see in your crystal ball?
I'm not exactly keen on being a manager of a first team. Similar to Scotty, I much prefer the sort of purity of, the sort of 10 to 16 year olds of, having that dream of reaching the top. I think that's much more rewarding for me personally, is, sort of nurturing those kids and giving them the sort of the tools or the advice of how to make it as a professional. I wish I kind of had that from that age, between 10 and 16 of things to do and little tips of how to make it as a professional. First team, I'm not really that keen on, to be honest with you.
Is that because you get sacked after about 6 months nowadays?
Yeah, there's that, and there's also the sort of having to deal with sort of first team players as such. There's a lot of prima donnas in the footballing world that I couldn't really be
bothered
entertaining. Couldn't really be bothered with them, to be honest with you. I'd much rather the sort of 10, 12, 13, 14 year olds that have the stars in their eyes and want to prove everything and do everything that they possibly can to reach the top. I think that would be a lot more rewarding than being a first team manager of a club.
That's all we got time for. Many thanks to Scott Allan and Ryan McGowan, and thank you for listening. Remember, we publish new episodes every weekday morning, so you can get your daily dose of Scottish football bright and early. So if you haven't done so already, just follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Scottish football, the gift that keeps on giving. Thanks for listening.
The Scotland Rugby podcast is now available every Tuesday. Join me, Andy Burke and Tom English. Just head to BBC Sounds and subscribe to the Scotland Rugby podcast.
It's just seismic stuff.
There's bucket hats as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is this a rugby podcast or is this a fashion podcast?
Why can't it be a bit of both?
Rugby. Let's get on to rugby. There's a lot to be excited about. Today's guest, John McGuigan.
Clubs are an absolute bedrock of everything Scottish rugby's about.
The Rugby Sports Sound podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.
You cannot help but be so excited. It's going to be the centre of the rugby universe.
BBC Sounds.